The only VPN to prove multiple times in court that they have no record of your internet activity is private internet access. Each time the judge said, show us the person's internet activity, and private internet access said, sorry, we don't have it. Their systems are also regularly audited by Deloitte to verify the no-log policy. And it's the only VPN with open source code, so the whole world can see that nothing is being logged. Private internet access is giving my audience 83% off, which is just $203 a month plus 4 extra months for free. Go to piavpn.com/DavidP. The link is down below. Welcome, everybody. Just mere days remain, and then it will all be over, and then the next phase will start. A very interesting interview that I want to play for you involving Kamala Harris. You know, one of the things some of you have written to me about include Kamala Harris's gender, the fact that she is a woman and that she would be the first woman president. And some of you have expressed the same question that was asked during this interview on NBC, which is, why isn't Kamala Harris leaning more into the fact that she is a woman and would be the first woman president? Kamala Harris gives an answer here. I think it's an excellent answer, and this aligns so beautifully with my view on identity politics. This is really good stuff. Let's take a look at it and then discuss.
You've been reluctant to lean into, to talk about the historic nature of your candidacy on the campaign trail. Why is that?
Well, I'm clearly a woman. I don't need to point that out to anyone. The point that most people really care about is, can you do the job? And do you have a plan to actually focus on them?
I hear you on
and
that.
That is why I spend the majority of my time listening and then addressing the concerns, the challenges, the dreams, the ambitions, and the aspirations of the American people. They deserve to have a president who's focused on them, as opposed to a Donald Trump who's constantly focused on himself. I think that's part of why people are exhausted with Donald Trump and his approach, because it's all about himself and his personal grievances and not about the American people.
This is I think this is the best answer Kamala Harris has given on any question this entire campaign. She's pointing out, I don't need to talk about the fact that I'm a woman. And everybody knows there's never been a woman president. Actually, a lot of people probably don't know that. You would be shocked the things you ask people on the street and they don't know. But the point here is, people who follow politics know we've never had a woman president. But that's not something she needs to talk about. And one of the beautiful things about Kamala Harris's campaign is that she hasn't needed to say, this is historic and I'd be the first woman president, and by the way, I'm a woman. It's all about what are the policies. And as I've said before, it's two different things to use identity to justify your presence or existence or candidacy versus to recognize the historic and impactful nature when we have milestones when it comes to identity. Nikki Haley wanted to be president. Tulsi Gabbard wanted to be president. Marianne Williamson wanted to be president. They all would have been the first woman president of the United States, but their candidacies weren't interesting to me for reasons that you all know, different with each one of the three of them. Kamala Harris's candidacy is interesting to me because she's running even to the left of Joe Biden, who arguably on paper is the most progressive president the country has ever had. And yes, if she were to win, I would have a significant connection to, wow, what would it mean to my daughter to see that there is now a woman president? Even though women make up 50% of this country and have for a long time, slightly more than 50%, we've never had a woman president, and now we do. That would be meaningful. But that's very different than the sort of identity politics stuff that I don't think that many people support, but that maybe more people would expect. And this goes beyond Kamala Harris. The entire campaign has not been built on that. Now, of course, there have been groups like Women for Harris, Black Women for Harris, White Women for Harris, whatever. Fine. There's no problem. It's the same as Blacks for Trump. There are identity groups that will signal support. But as far as Kamala Harris's campaign with regard to identity and this answer, I don't know that she's given a better answer on anything this entire campaign. Now, the topic of gender continued to come up during this NBC interview. Kamala Harris was asked, Do you not see sexism as a factor in this race? And here's her answer to that.
That's how I will lead.
Do you not see sexism as a factor in this race at all?
I don't think of it that way. My challenge is the challenge of making sure I can talk with and listen to as many voters as possible and earn their vote. And I will never assume that anyone in our country should elect a leader based on their gender or their race. Instead, that leader needs to earn the vote based on substance and what they will do to address challenges and to inspire people to know that their aspirations and their ambitions can and will be achieved through the opportunity to do that.
She's not denying that sexism exists. She's not denying that racism exists. But she's pointing out that she doesn't go in assuming that that's the number one prism through which people vote. Now, I'll say what she's not willing to say. It is the number one prism through which some people vote, but not the majority. And again, just the right tone. I'm not here to play identity politics. I'm not here to talk about if I lose, it'll be because of sexism or racism. I'm here to offer the American people something, and it's different than what Trump offers. It's not demeaning people. It's not attacking people. It's not saying, oh, it'll be the Jews' fault if I lose, or, oh, if you're Latino and voting for Harris, you should have your head examined, or whatever the case. Finally, Hallie Jackson during the interview asks Kamala Harris, would you consider pardoning Trump? Now, very different reactions to what Harris says here. So let's see where we land.
It is entirely possible that the federal court cases against the former president will continue on. He is, of course, facing those felony charges. Would you consider, if you win and he's convicted, a pardon for former President Trump?
I'm not going to get into those hypotheticals. I'm focused on the next 14 days.
But do you believe, is there any part of you that subscribes to the argument that has been made in the past that a pardon could help bring America together, could help unify the country and move on?
Let me tell you what's going to help us move on. I get elected president of the United States.
So there are some people who love this answer, who say, why on earth would she engage with that question? It's a hypothetical. It would only apply to federal, not state charges. We don't know the future of what's happening with Trump's legal problems. Why would she answer it? She did absolutely the right thing. Now, there's another group who said she did not rule out pardoning Trump. Why wouldn't she rule out pardoning Trump? She shouldn't do it. Nixon getting pardoned was a massive mistake, and the last thing we need to do is repeat the mistake that was made with Nixon for a man who has done far worse things. I don't lean towards that. I think whatever answer she gives, if she's definitive, it would be a problem. If she says, no, I will absolutely not pardon Trump, it could be seen as divisive, even though I don't want her to pardon Trump. I think that's correct, but it could be seen as divisive. If she says, yes, I will pardon Trump, or I will consider pardoning Trump, I think there are people who would be turned off about that from the left and the middle. So I think it was correct not to give a specific answer. My instinct is that she would not pardon Donald Trump. And by the way, I don't think pardoning Trump, if such a scenario came up, would actually unify the country. I just don't have any evidence whatsoever to think that it would. I've been critical of some of Kamala Harris's interviews. This interview with NBC's Hallie Jackson, almost perfect. Going right at Donald Trump's perception of his own manhood, former President Barack Obama praised at a rally Tim Walz's skills in doing mechanical work on his truck and sort of ridiculing Trump's vision of himself as the alpha male. This goes right to Trump's primary vulnerabilities. Let's take a listen.
Love that dude. Love that man. The kind of person who should be in politics. He's a veteran, he's a teacher, he's a coach, he's a hunter, been a great governor, knows who he is and knows what's important. You can tell those flannel shirts he wears have gotten some wear. They come from his closet. Consultant didn't give it to him. Tim's got skills. The other day I found out he can take a vintage truck apart and put it back together again. You think Donald Trump can do that? For that matter, do you think Donald Trump's ever changed a tire in his life? That's the guy, he gets a flat tire. He says, Jeeves, change that tire, please. His chauffeur. Point is, Tim will be an outstanding vice president, but
Barack Obama's very good at this. That's not news to any of us. But one of the things that has been done so much better this time around compared to 2020 and compared to 2016 is that we now really know, it took a while, right? We finally figured it out. We know Trump's real vulnerabilities. And of course, the vulnerabilities have increased over time as cognitively he has deteriorated and is increasingly feeble. So there's certainly more material to work with. But they're really hitting this guy where it hurts. Remember thinking back to the debate with Kamala Harris, how Kamala Harris just mentioning, go to a rally, watch a rally. They're boring and people leave. It wildly triggered him and sent him for a loop. All of this stuff about manhood and whether Trump is alpha or beta, Trump's concocted and contrived, as we spoke about last week, a vision of, or a version of himself, maybe better said, where he is the alpha male. In reality, he's really not. He doesn't have the muscles. He's actually obese. He doesn't exercise. He wears more makeup than most people. His hair is, dyed and transplanted. The whole thing. He's really not the picture of the alpha male, but he's convinced some people that he is. And what Barack Obama has done, what Kamala Harris is that they've found those vulnerabilities and they've gone directly at him in a way where people just laugh. And one of the things that egomaniacal narcissists with these alpha view of themselves hate is when people are laughing at them. They often choose, as Trump has done, to pretend that people are laughing with them rather than at them. But Barack Obama's very, very good at this. Barack Obama also pointing out these posts from Trump in the middle of the night. What is he doing?
Because there is absolutely no evidence that this man thinks about anybody but himself. I've said it before. Donald Trump is a 78-year-old billionaire who hasn't stopped whining about his problems since he came down that golden escalator 9 years ago. And when he's complaining 2, 3 in the morning. He's texting, what's he doing? When he's not complaining, he's trying to sell you stuff. Have you noticed that? Who does that? You're running for president and you're hawking merchandise. Gold sneakers, $100,000 watch. Supposed to be Swiss watch, he says. The best watch. Why are you selling the watch? What are you doing?
That is the real question. In general, what are you doing? What on earth are you doing? Barack Obama also very poignantly in this speech in Wisconsin, telling the audience exactly what we've been saying with regard to strength and masculinity and alpha and beta. Barack Obama points out the vision of strength that is put out there by MAGA, that's not real strength. And he outlines what real strength is.
He calls service members who died in battle losers. When he calls our fellow citizens vermin, people make excuses for it. He's making a joke. He doesn't mean it. It's okay. The attitude is it's okay as long as their side wins. And I've noticed this especially with some men who think Trump's behavior is somehow a sign of strength. You never apologize for anything. You're not accountable for anything. I'm here to tell you that's not what real strength is. Never has been. Real strength's about working hard. Real strength's about taking responsibility for your actions. Real strength's about telling the truth even when it's inconvenient. Real strength is about helping people who need it and standing up for those who can't stand up for themselves. That's what we should want for our daughters and our sons. That's what I want in the President of the United States.
This is exactly the argument that we were hoping to make, not as eloquently as Barack Obama made it last week in our discussion about the MAGA sphere and the MAGA version of masculinity. It's a message a lot of people very clearly need to hear. Now, Fox News didn't love this. Fox News cut away from Barack Obama as soon as he started to make the case against Donald Trump.
What I cannot understand is why anybody would think that Donald Trump will shake things up in a way that's good for you. That I do not understand.
All right, live from Madison, Wisconsin, where former President Barack Obama is campaigning for Kamala Harris, to Peoria, Arizona, where VP candidate and Trump running mate.
All right, so they didn't want to hear Barack Obama make a very good and convincing case against Donald Trump. Under 2 weeks to go. In 2 weeks, it'll be over. Let's hope, right? It'll be November 6th, and let's hope that by then it's over. Maybe one extra day to count. We'll see. Which way is it going to go? It's a coin flip. I'll be on the Piers Morgan show today talking about exactly this. Hope you will check it out. Let's take a very quick break, and then we'll come back with some explosive new reporting from The Atlantic and so much more. You watch YouTube, you listen to podcasts, you've heard a ton of ads for VPNs, but all VPNs are pretty much the same, except for one. Our sponsor, Private Internet Access, is the only VPN that can confirm your internet activity is not being logged. Their software is fully open source, so you can see that traffic isn't being logged. Their systems are also independently audited by the Big Four accounting firm Deloitte to confirm nothing is being logged, and they've demonstrated multiple times in court they have no record of user activity. Everyone should use a VPN when they connect to the internet. Hides your IP address so governments and big tech can't track you, and you can access Netflix and Hulu content not normally available in your home country. Private Internet Access has servers in 91 different countries and all 50 US states. You can protect all of your devices with just a single account, and Private Internet Access is giving my audience 83% off. Comes out to just $203 a month plus 4 extra months for free. Go to piavpn.com/DavidP. The link is in the description. Hitler did some good things, said Donald Trump, according to his former chief of staff, John Kelly. Explosive reporting over the last 24 hours, building on much of what we already knew about Donald Trump based on prior allegations, and I'm going to go through it with you. Trump's former chief of staff says that Trump once said, Hitler did some good things. Let's listen to a recording of John Kelly explaining this.
He commented more than once that, that Hitler did some good things too. And of course, if you know history, again, I think he's lacking in that. But if you know what Hitler was all about, it'd be pretty hard to make an argument that he did anything good.
So what would you say when he said to you that Hitler did a lot of good things?
Well, I tell him that. I said, first of all, you should never say that. But if you knew what Hitler was all about from the beginning to the end, everything he did was in support of his racist, fascist life, philosophy, so that nothing he did you could argue was good. It was certainly not done for the right reason, but he would occasionally say that.
What would he say when you would lay that out to him?
He'd just, that'd be the end of the conversation usually.
This is one of those things that has come up a lot in casual conversation, which is, whatever you want to say about Hitler, the trains ran on time. The Nazis really knew how to keep public transportation running, or whatever else the case may be. John Kelly really defeats this by explaining it was all done for the wrong reasons. The context of that, listen, there are people in fascist regimes who sometimes they get medicine from the dear leader, or there's jobs, but the jobs are doing horrible things. This stuff about, Hitler coalesced the German people, or all of this stuff. the context is a disaster that should never be praised, and John Kelly lays that out. But the thing is, it doesn't matter to Trump. That's what we've learned. For Trump, the motivations of Hitler aren't what matters. What matters is that Trump is enamored with these authoritarian strongmen who just do whatever the hell they want. Trump's impressed by that form of strength that rules from the top rather than actually building a valuable and worthwhile community. And in these very recordings, John Kelly was also asked, do you think Trump is a fascist? And here's what he had to say about that.
What do you think? Do you think he's a fascist?
Well, I'm looking at the definition of fascism. It's a far-right, authoritarian, ultra-nationalist political ideology and movement characterized by a dictatorial leader, centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression of opposition, belief in a natural social hierarchy. So certainly, in my experience, those are the kind of things that he thinks would work better in terms of running America. You know, again, back to this issue of, democracy is complicated, messy to operate, probably the worst kind of government there is, except for all the other ones. I think Churchill once said that. And again, our Constitution, our founders built in to the Constitution and to the way our government operates.
You know, this is not a guy that I would necessarily hire if I was president, which of course I could never be because I was not born in the United States. But this is as thoughtful a reflection as you can have on Trumpism from those that were within Trumpism as I've seen. And there have been plenty of good reflections, right? Cassidy Hutchinson, and there are other, but this is really good. Now, of course, immediately the reaction from Trump world has been, oh, John Kelly's lying. These are all lies. I just don't think so. We have a lot of evidence that Trump is a liar and no evidence that John Kelly is a liar. Ambassador John Bolton appeared on CNN. His view is that you can believe John Kelly over Trump. Now, of course, Trump would say you also can't believe John Bolton, but you increasingly have to believe that there is a calculated conspiracy to tell lies about Trump that are completely consistent with everything we know about him. So here's John Bolton telling Caitlin Collins. Now, I mean, you can take what he says to the bank.
The campaign has attacked John's credibility in any comparison of what John Kelly might say versus what Donald Trump might say about a particular event, or what these munchkins on the Trump campaign are saying about John Kelly. You can take what John says to the bank. I'm absolutely convinced. I didn't hear many, probably most of these statements myself, but if John says that Donald Trump said them, I believe it implicitly. I think it's certainly this recitation of what he's done should be compelling to people not to vote for Trump. Trump said after leaving office, said it publicly, he would suspend the Constitution or terminate it because of the unfairness, the effort to steal the 2020 election. That statement alone, if he said nothing else, if he had never mentioned the words Adolf Hitler, that alone is disqualifying in my point of view. So if people are troubled, and many Republicans are, they don't like Donald Trump at all. I don't like the media commentators who say the entire Republican Party belongs to Donald Trump now.
You know, it's actually even more than this. If you are not in the Trump cult, if you're just a Republican, but you're not in the Trump cult, you know that what John Kelly is saying is the truth. You know that it's exactly the sort of thing Trump would say because he's so in love with these dictators, that Hitler did some good things. That's exactly the sort of thing Trump would say. And by the way, I know that we kind of go back and forth on this Trump and the Jews stuff. Oh, but Trump's son-in-law is Jewish and his daughter converted and his grandkids are Jewish. Okay, what we have to look at is what Trump says. And Trump is already pointing in the direction of blaming Jewish voters, despite being this tiny fraction of the American population. Trump is setting up to blame Jewish voters if he were to lose.
I wasn't treated properly by the voters who happen to be Jewish. I don't know. Do they know what the hell is happening? If I don't win this election And the Jewish people would really have a lot to do with that if that happens, because at 40%, that means 60% of the people are voting for the enemy.
Yeah, what Trump is ignoring in this entire thing, it is absolutely true that Jewish Americans are one of the most left voting blocs in the country. Jewish Americans and Black Americans consistently rejecting the retrograde values of the Republican Party and saying, let's vote for progress, let's vote for a positive vision, let's vote for something better. That's true. But there's very few Jews, relatively speaking, in the United States. And in the sense that the election is going to be close. So in the sense that Trump wants to blame Jews preemptively if he loses, it's almost like saying, well, I'm going to blame those whose kids are involved in kids soccer. Statistically speaking, there are so many groups with more people in the United States than Jewish Americans. So why is Trump fixated on Jewish Americans? Your guess is as good as mine, but so far, total consistency from what Trump has said publicly and what he's allegedly said privately. The Atlantic, with further explosive reporting about Donald Trump's enamoration and infatuation with Nazi leader Adolf Hitler. The Atlantic, in an article with Jeffrey Goldberg, with some stunning reporting about the things that Trump has said in private. I'm going to put a couple of quotes up on the screen for you. Here's the first one. The personal qualities displayed by Trump in his reaction to the cost of the Guillen funeral, contempt, rage, parsimony, racism, hardly surprised his inner circle. Trump has frequently voiced his disdain for those who serve in the military and for their devotion to duty, honor, sacrifice. Former generals who have worked for Trump say that the sole military virtue he prizes is obedience. As his presidency drew to a close, and in the years since, he has become more and more interested in the advantages of dictatorship and the absolute control over the military that he believes it would deliver. Quote, I need the kind of generals that Hitler had, Trump said in a private conversation in the White House, according to two people who heard him say it. Quote, people who were totally loyal to him that follow orders. A campaign spokesperson, Pfeiffer, responded, this is absolutely false. Trump never said this. Consider that with every single one of these quotes, we have Trump in public saying almost the same thing. In public, Trump has said, I prefer my soldiers who don't get captured, an attack on the late Senator John McCain. He recently said he doesn't respect as soldiers generals who now disagree with him politically. Trump is willing to say this stuff in public. Is it much of a stretch that in private he says this sort of thing? I need absolute loyalty like Hitler had. Another quote, this one regarding this funeral that Trump had promised to pay for and then didn't want to pay for. Quote, at a certain point, according to two people present at the meeting, Trump asked, did they bill us for the funeral? What did it cost? According to attendees and to contemporaneous notes of the meeting taken by a participant, an aide answered, yes, we received a bill. The funeral cost $60,000. Trump became angry. It doesn't cost $60,000 to bury a fucking Mexican. He turned to his chief of staff, Mark Meadows, and issued an order. Don't pay it. Later that day, he was still agitated. Can you believe it? Fucking people trying to rip me off. This is exactly what we see publicly. A microphone glitches during a rally and Trump goes, do not pay them. Trump known for not paying bills he promised to pay, for rally communication audiovisual services. He goes into a restaurant. He goes, it's on me. Everybody get whatever you want. He never pays. And similarly, it's an anecdote that in private, Trump is saying, I'm not going to pay for this. Publicly, Trump talks about Mexicans, rapists, this, that, the other thing. And privately, he goes, it shouldn't cost this much to bury a Mexican. It's hard to imagine that any of this stuff is not real when it comports so accurately with everything that we know Donald Trump to say privately. And that's why publicly. And that's why it seems believable to me. Whether the electorate cares at this point in time, that I couldn't tell you. Don't forget that the best way to support the David Pakman Show is by becoming a member, which gives you access to the daily bonus show, the regular show with no commercials, You also get access to our entire archive of every episode dating back a really long time and plenty of other awesome membership perks. Go to joinpacman.com, joinpacman.com. As many of you surely know, Donald Trump is a terrible candidate for many reasons. His contempt for democratic norms, his racism and xenophobia, his cognitive decline, his felony convictions, all of these render him completely unfit to serve, period. Trump's first term was a disaster. Project 2025 suggests a second term would be even more extreme and horrifying. But one of the most singularly disqualifying aspects of Donald Trump's candidacy is something I'm afraid we've become numb to over time, and that's Trump's stance on climate change, which he has repeatedly called a hoax. That's not just a casual remark, it's a dangerous rejection of reality. After experiencing devastating back-to-back hurricanes impacting millions of Americans, climate change denial really should be viewed as an urgent disqualifier. If we were living in a rational society, the climate emergency would dominate national discourse, but instead issues like immigration at the southern border continue to take center stage, including phrases like, "They're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs," even though the impact of climate change is far-reaching and affects everyone, Democrats and Republicans and independents alike. And yet it gets pushed to this sort of back burner. Year after year, we see new records for extreme weather events, and they're getting worse and more frequent. According to NOAA, climate-related disasters are costing the U.S. billions each year. Those will only escalate if we stay down this path of inaction. It's a national security issue that the military considers important. Every disaster we face today should be a reminder of what's to come. But instead of mobilizing to address this issue, Trump and other MAGA Republicans just keep denying the very existence of the crisis, sometimes even saying things like, "Oh, it's nice when it's warmer weather," or "more beachfront property would be a good thing." They would rather prioritize corporate profits over the planet's health and the welfare of their own children and grandchildren. And when you look at Project 2025, you should be particularly alarmed. Not only would Project 2025 promote more fossil fuel extraction, but it would also defund FEMA. It would cut disaster response programs, even as these extreme weather events are becoming more common and more severe. Imagine being in the path of a hurricane, unable to get timely forecasts because Trump wants to privatize hurricane tracking, making it a pay-for-service model. The economic consequences of ignoring climate change are staggering. In Florida, homeowners insurance has gone up 60% since 2019, largely because of the region's vulnerability to hurricanes that have grown more intense and more frequent. Even when you do pay for homeowners insurance, your claim might be rejected in the aftermath of a natural disaster like Hurricane Milton, a trend which we're already starting to see. And it's only going to get worse. The IPCC has been crystal clear. We have to drastically cut carbon emissions if we want to avoid a catastrophic outcome. Even if we were to accept the Republican premise that illegal immigration is the absolute number one issue that deserves to be discussed more than anything else, just imagine the effects that climate change will have on immigration over the next century. The UN has projected that by 2050, parts of the planet, especially in the tropics and the Middle East, will be uninhabitable due to extreme heat. Where will all of those people go? So even if you're someone who's super concerned about immigration, addressing the climate crisis still should be a top priority. But instead of tackling the crisis, Trump doubles down on fossil fuels. He prioritizes oil and gas, dismisses renewable energy, and ridicules wind turbines, even calling them bird graveyards.
They kill the birds. You want to see a bird graveyard? You just go. Take a look. A bird graveyard? Go under a windmill someday. You'll see more birds than you've ever seen ever in your life.
Trump doesn't just ignore the problem. He makes it worse. His administration dismantled environmental protections to keep air and water clean. He made it clear that health and safety take a backseat to appeasing fossil fuel donors. Democrats are trying, but not doing enough. Biden has increased federal funding for climate investment, but he also presided over an escalation in fossil fuel production. We've talked about it. Trump's energy independence, we're more energy independent under Biden in the sense of producing fossil fuels, but it's arguably the wrong direction. Both Biden and Harris value economically thwarting China. So they've undermined our ability to import cheap solar panels and electric cars by putting in tariffs. And as a presidential candidate in 2020, Kamala Harris pitched a $10 trillion climate plan whose public and private investments would have dwarfed the $1.6 trillion estimated federal cost of Biden's major climate, energy, infrastructure, and technology legislation. But as a candidate in 2024, Harris has been a little less ambitious as far as that goes. Now, during the VP debate, JD Vance dismissed climate change entirely. He called it weird science. But during the same debate, Tim Walz, who does believe in climate change, boasted about those record oil and gas production numbers under the Biden administration. As a tool to thwart Trump's talking points, fine. But as a long-term path forward, not so good. The climate crisis is an issue where left and right should be able to work together on solutions in a unifying, bipartisan way. And we shouldn't shy away from the kind of bold action that Kamala Harris pitched in 2020. That's where we need to go, because the climate emergency is effectively here. Delaying action is a waste of time, and it's also a public health crisis. Rising temperatures leading to more heat-related illness, respiratory issues from worsening air quality, the spread of malaria and other diseases. The World Health Organization estimates that climate change could cause an additional 250,000 deaths per year from 2030 to 2050. 250,000 per year. Trump's refusal to take climate change seriously is ignorant, but like much of Trump's delusions, it's also deadly. It's not enough to ask, why does Trump continue to deny reality? We have to ask, why are we as a society tolerating leaders like Trump who not only ignore the climate crisis, but make it worse? And it's not just Trump. According to the Center for American Progress, there are 123 sitting congresspeople who think climate change is a hoax. So the denialism isn't just about ignorance, it's also about profit. The recent Republican debates showcased the denial. When asked to raise their hands if they believe human behavior is causing climate change, none of the candidates responded. Vivek Ramaswamy openly declared climate change agenda is a hoax, arguing for continuing to use fossil fuels in the name of prosperity. And the result is this uninformed public that ends up feeling powerless in the face of a crisis threatening their very existence. A study from earlier this year found 15% of Americans don't even believe climate change is happening, never mind who's causing it or what to do about it. So what does responsible leadership look like in the face of a climate emergency? Number one, we have to acknowledge that we're in an emergency. We don't even have consensus from the Republican Party that there is even change, never mind that it's an emergency. We need leaders who will move away from fossil fuels responsibly. None of us are saying stop the flow tomorrow, but we move away from fossil fuels while investing in renewable energy and the infrastructure required to support it. Trump's anti-science agenda isn't just reckless, it's a threat to our future. Trump's policies cater to corporate interests at the expense of public health, at the expense of safety, at the expense of the environment. So if we want to avoid disaster, we need to treat climate change like the emergency it is. That means ending our reliance on fossil fuels, investing massively in renewable energy. It won't be bad for the economy. It will actually be good for the economy if done the right way, and we need to have buy-in from the people at the top. Whatever issue these right-wingers claim to be concerned about, dealing with climate change would address it. They say they're concerned about immigration. Think of the demand for influx of people that will happen if the displacement in the tropics and the Middle East due to heat takes place. If you care about immigration, you should want to do something about the climate emergency. If your concern is economic, if we can get away from a lot of these inefficient, dirty technologies, often subsidized by the government, and move towards clean, renewable energy and all of the jobs that that energy and its required infrastructure would bring, those concerned about the economy would also get what they want. We really can't afford to be passive in the face of this. Denialism isn't just ignorant, it's dangerous. And put everything else aside. Put aside the crimes, put aside the incompetence, put aside the cognitive decline, put aside all of the worst things about Trump. Trump's view on climate science alone should completely disqualify him and prevent him from ever being reelected in this country. Will that actually happen? We don't know. If you value what we do at The David Pakman Show, remember to support us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/David Pakman Show, where you can get access to behind-the-scenes videos, the daily bonus show, the commercial-free daily show. You can support the show for as little as $2 a month. Check it out at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Donald Trump held a campaign rally in Greensboro, North Carolina yesterday. And of course, the mere fact that less than 2 weeks from the election, Trump is having to campaign in North Carolina and defend North Carolina against the surging vote share of Kamala Harris in the polls is a bad sign for Donald Trump. There are good signs for Trump, but defending North Carolina 11 days before an election, 13 days before an election, is not a good sign. Trump slurring heavily, saying that vice presidential candidate Tim Walz is the stupidest man to ever run for office.
The stupidest man I've ever seen run for office. Is there something wrong with that guy? He's always bouncing. He's going with his heart. Yeah.
As usual, Trump envious and jealous of the fact that Tim Walz appears to be able to connect with people in a far more real way than Donald Trump has ever been able to connect with anyone, even probably members of his own family, quite frankly. Trump also now deploying a staple, in a sense, of his new campaign, which is an impersonation of Kamala Harris that I don't think is particularly good. You know, this is not exactly up to the caliber of Shane Gillis or Matthew Friend's impressions of Trump. If you're expecting that, it's not quite there.
32 days, 32, 32.
And as usual, Trump crowds who seem extraordinarily sheltered love comedy that just isn't funny. They love it, and the crowd really reacting to that one. As usual, in this mindset of everything Trump says, he sort of means the opposite. Trump saying he's glad that Barack Obama, or as he says, Barack Hussein Obama, is campaigning for Kamala Harris, by which we can only be led to assume that Trump means he's terrified that Obama's on the campaign trail.
They're bringing out Obama. I say, oh, they did that with Hillary Clinton. Good. I'm glad they're bringing him out. The reason they're bringing him out, because he doesn't even want to do it. I think he's exhausted. I watched him talking. I think the guy's exhausted. And I never say a guy's looking old, but he's looking a little bit older, isn't he? You know, nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong.
Of course, what Trump means here is he's terrified that Obama's out campaigning for Harris.
Obama.
It's Trump who is looking older, and it's Trump who's actually the exhausted one. The projection continued throughout this event, despite the fact that Trump regularly sleeps through all sorts of things. Trump says it's Kamala Harris who's doing the sleeping.
That's a big group back there. You know where Kamala is today? They don't want to tell you. No. You don't know where she is? You know where she is? She's sleeping. She took a day off. She's got no energy at all. Her speeches last for about 15 minutes.
And of course, it is Donald Trump who has been canceling interviews and other events. It's Trump who seems exhausted. It's Trump who's been falling asleep at all sorts of events recently. What's happening here is that Trump had a series of attacks, And they were, oh, Biden's sleeping. All of a sudden, Biden's not the person that Trump is running against. So Trump has no choice, I guess, because he can't come up with anything better than to keep using the exact same attack lines against Kamala Harris, even if they make no sense. In a completely backwards statement, Trump says, you know who's going to make us healthy again? Bobby Kennedy is going to make us all healthy.
Make America healthy again. Come on, Bobby. Bobby's going to do it. Bobby, let's go, Bobby. You're going to make us healthy, Bobby. We will make America strong again.
There you go. Bobby Kennedy is going to make us healthy again. That's Trump's idea. And then there is no end to an authoritarian rally, Castro-like, painfully 1 hour and 54 minutes in duration. It's not over until the orange man does the double jerk dance. All right, so Trump capping off another harebrained rally, the crowd disoriented and confused. Sometimes, you know, it's funny. There's a competition at Trump rallies. Who's more confused, Trump or the crowd? And sometimes it's really difficult to tell. It wasn't just Trump on the campaign trail yesterday. It was also JD Vance, known to some as JP Mandel.
We've endorsed JP, right? JD Mandel.
Exactly, JD Mandel. Bloodthirsty MAGAs booing down a journalist who had the audacity to ask JD, hey, will you accept the election results? Is that something? Boo. Any basic question that JD is unwilling to answer, the audience jumps in and just boos the reporter.
CBS 5 and 3 TV. Simple question. We're 2 weeks away from... Got a lot of fans here, as you can hear.
Just one. I just heard one. Yeah. That's okay. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, we'll end with this question. The election is 2 weeks from today. I'm not going to be asking you about 4 years ago, but from what you've seen, from what you've learned, are you confident in the Arizona election system, and are you going to accept the results moving forward?
Well, look, I think that
Boo.
we're in a better place than we were in 2020. And I think that what we're going to keep on working on over the next couple of weeks, I mean, you saw this even in 2022, where some of the voting machines in Maricopa went down on Election Day. Now, whether you think that was just incompetence or something else, it's not okay. We want every legal ballot to be cast and to be counted in the United States of America. So we're going to keep on fighting for election integrity.
So that's not a yes.
But look, Dennis, sitting here today, are we going to get this perfect? Of course we're not going to get it perfect, but we're doing a hell of a lot better in 2024 than we were in 2020. So the best message that I can give is to get out there and vote through whatever method makes the most sense. And look, I'm one of these guys, I don't love election season. I like election day. But as President Trump said, it is what it is. And if we're going to have early voting and mail-in voting and election day voting, then we need to take advantage of every opportunity we have to vote. Get out there.
Yeah, so this is, of course, the correct message if you're trying to win an election, which is don't tell people vote in fewer ways than the other side is voting. Now, Trump has gone back and forth between, are you going to say that the voting methods other than on same day election in person are fraud or not? Sometimes Trump says it is fraud. Sometimes Trump says it's not. But what we can be sure of, if I were a betting man, I would not bet on the election results. It's a coin flip. It's really a coin flip. What I would bet on is that Trump will say he won. I think at some point in this thing, whether it's late on November 5th, early on November 6th, later in the week, I don't know. At some point, Trump is going to say that he won. Now, for those who heard JD Vance's answer there and said, I don't know, he sounds kind of reasonable. JD Vance is completely unreasonable on this question. Here is JD Vance being asked during the All In podcast, would you have certified the 2020 election? And he says, no, he would not.
He was asked to not certify it.
Sure.
So would you have certified? I'll ask you for the third.
Again, I would have asked the states to submit alternative slates of electors and let the country have the debate about what actually matters and what kind of an election that we have.
You
in
wouldn't
these
have
important
certified,
states.
to be clear.
I would have asked the states to submit alternative slates of
I think
electors.
that's what you're saying.
That's what I would have done.
That's a no. They love to frame this as if it's a completely reasonable and fair thing. It's not about I wouldn't have certified. I would have gone back and I would have said to the states that Biden won, give us your Trump electors so we have them, so that they're ready. And then let's have a debate about who won, as if it's subject to debate who won when we have all of the evidence that Biden won and no evidence that he did not. They love to frame it like it's a reasonable thing. I'm not crazy. Listen, I wasn't going to go in there and just declare Trump the king. I was just going to say, hey, come up with alternate electors. Why? I don't know. Is there any legal basis? No. Come up with alternate electors and let's debate who won. See, I'm a reasonable guy. Anything short of maintaining the schedule on which Biden would be certified the winner, given that there was no evidence that Biden was not the winner, is an extreme view, but they figured out a way to couch it differently. Now, here's a video where the good liars caught up with JD and said, did Trump win in 2020? And JD says, yes, he did.
Who won the 2020 election? Could you just answer, did Donald Trump win, yes or no?
Yes.
He did win?
Yep.
So will you concede? Will you concede if your opponent gets more votes?
All right. So as you heard there, Jason Selvig of the Good Liars saying, did Trump win? And JP Mandel says, yes, he did. He won. Now, back to JD's event yesterday, it went wrong in just about every way. Just about everything that could go wrong did. JD Vance's lectern sign fell off again. Can they not even get double-sided tape right? And he blames Kamala Harris.
And ask yourself what you can do from now until then to make sure it doesn't happen.
There it goes.
That if there's a... Kamala Harris put that sign up, ladies and gentlemen. I'm telling you, she did. She's already trying to steal the 2024 election, right?
Isn't that funny? It's so funny to blame Kamala Harris for stuff. And then finally, JD Vance does not directly answer whether he wants to strip legal status from migrants who are here legally. This is a critical question because Donald Trump was recently told, you know that you keep calling the Haitian migrants in Springfield, Ohio, illegal. They're here legally. They're here with something called temporary protected status. Joe Biden didn't invent that. Barack Obama didn't invent that. It's been around since the early 90s. You may not like it, but they're here legally. Trump has said, I'm going to get that overturned and we're going to deport them. JD Vance is asked, are you planning? Do you support stripping legal status from people who have it? Let's see if we can figure out JD's answer.
Hi, JD Vance. We talked a few weeks ago in Tucson. I'm Jose Angel from Telemundo. I want to ask you a little bit because Donald Trump has said before that he will revoke the temporary protective status of some migrants in Ohio. And I want to ask you, what's your plan? Will you support that? The same thing for migrants in different communities, not just Haitians, Venezuelans, or Mexicans in general that are applying for asylum, which is basically a program that is legally based. And what would you do with them if you would revoke them or not?
Well, there are, of course, so many differences between Donald Trump's approach to the border and Kamala Harris's approach to the border.
Notice how this is, it's already off topic.
This particular issue, I think that what Kamala Harris has done is she has used programs that are meant to help people who are escaping tyranny, and she's used it to grant amnesty to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be.
Now, of course, Kamala Harris has done nothing. She doesn't control or have any say in those laws
in the country, and that has to stop. Because here's what happens. Here's what... So here's what happens when Kamala Harris grants millions upon millions of people legal status.
Okay, he doesn't answer the question. I'm not going to torture you with another 90 seconds of video. He doesn't answer the question. He blames Kamala Harris for personally granting millions of undocumented migrants legal status, which she didn't do. She had nothing to do with it. The vice president has nothing to do with that. These decisions are made by various agencies completely out of the control of the vice president. JD's events are not going well. And there's a reason why of all the favorability, I believe last I saw favorability is like Tim Walz, people love him, followed by Kamala Harris, followed by Trump, with JD Vance at the absolute bottom in favorability. JD reminding us of why that's the case. A declining Donald Trump attempted to use words to speak to Latino voters coherently, and it did not work. Trump held a so-called Latino town hall in Doral, Florida. Their pronunciation of these words never makes any sense, by the way. And Pizzagate rained its ugly head as a gentleman started talking about QAnon Pizzagate stuff and organ harvesting. And Trump just sits there nodding at the guy. Bonkers, cuckoo for Cocoa Puff stuff. This one did not go well. The QAnon got into the house.
Fire in me and our company to the awareness of child trafficking. Now, last year, and I know this because we're involved in anti-trafficking. On April 26, 2023, Tara Lee Rodas testified before Congress that the U.S. is the middleman in this trafficking. And I've been to Central America. Our kids are being bought for pennies on the dollar, and they're sold. We know where they are. You know, none of these sponsors that they're handed off to have been vetted. They know that they're being sold into slavery, into sex, into body parts.
This is straight up QAnon Pizzagate stuff, and Trump just sits there listening, and everybody pretends this is normal.
Etc. And so we are the middleman. We're profiting off of this. And, you know, Mr. President, when you become president, we need to follow this money because it's dark money. You know, we're exploiting our children. But something happened after Tara Lee Rodas, just last year, testified there were 85,000 children missing.
Yeah, so Tara Lee Rodas is a total fraud and a grifter. But putting that aside, even this bores Trump. Trump is doing his arms crossed pouting look where he doesn't want to hear another word of this nonsense because it's all so boring to him. Trump also started a statement with the words, "How would you like to be a woman, a little girl?" Now, if you know anything about Trump, you would suspect that what comes after this is wacky stuff, and it is.
Go and open the trunk of a car. That's how they put them mostly in trunks of cars. How would you like to be a woman, a little girl, a little boy? In the trunk of a car, that's how they find them. A lot of times they're dead because of the heat. They drive through. By the time they get to the destination, they open the trunk and they're dead.
So Trump continuing with the lurid stories that, you know, the funny thing about a lot of these stories, and individually these stories are tragic. I don't know who Trump is speaking of specifically. I don't doubt that in a country of 340 million, someone's been found dead in the trunk of a car. It's a tragedy. There's no doubt about it. The thing that's sort of strange or funny or ironic or curious about these stories is that even if you accept the stories as true and you look at the details of the stories, there's nothing in the details of these stories that would make a logical person go, oh, someone was killed and found in the trunk of a car. I'm voting for Trump instead of Kamala Harris. They skip over. It's assumed that if Trump's stories are true, the lurid stories are true, obviously you'd vote for Trump instead of Harris. They never actually make that case. They'll vaguely allude to she let in these millions of people, which of course she did not. She didn't do anything. But even if you grant them some of these stories, it wouldn't necessarily be a situation where you would go, well, obviously, I should be voting for Donald Trump over Kamala Harris. Okay, next clip here. A completely unintelligible Trump just rants and raves with buzzwords that he doesn't understand. And this is where it really went bad. Trump started to have a public meltdown.
That angle is not there anymore. They tried it. They had solar. They had solar fields that were so big. I mean, I saw a solar field come, and I'm in favor of solar. But
Trump saw a solar field come. I mean, it's like, what does that even mean?
It's not the same thing. It's got to fire up these massive plants. It's not going to. But I saw a solar field the other day that looked like it took up half the desert. I'd never saw anything like it. It's all steel and glass and wires, and it looks like hell.
There were wires. Wow.
And you see rabbits, they get caught in it, and for the environmental.
Yeah, Trump now cares about rabbits, which is a tough one for me to believe. Donald Trump again raising this line of it is other Americans who are the enemy within.
And where they're going to go. And somebody, who did that? Can you imagine somebody doing that? That's the enemy. I guess that maybe is the enemy from within, as I talk about. We have an enemy from within. They hate to talk about it.
And people clap. Yes, the enemy is our fellow Americans who have different political views. Trump again suggests that if he loses, there will never be another election. Mostly it's Trump saying this, even Trump, though Trump goes, oh, people are saying, you're the one saying it.
Lunatic, and we can't take a chance on losing this election, because if we lose this election, we may not have a country anymore. We may not, we never, and I've heard this from a lot of very smart people.
The only people I'm hearing this from are Trump and Elon Musk, saying this would be the last election. Trump now making a regular feature of his public appearances, saying that Kamala Harris has an IQ problem.
We'll see what happens on November 5th, let's see what happens. But there's something wrong with him, honestly. There's something wrong. And there's something wrong with her, too. She's slow, low IQ, something. I don't know what the hell it is, but they lie.
And of course, it's another instance of projection. Trump increasingly self-conscious about the fact that he is declining cognitively. So he says that Kamala Harris, who is obviously not suffering from cognitive decline, she's the one with the IQ problem. Her brain's not working. Now, there was a surreal Kafka-esque moment at which a pastor said it was time to pray over Donald Trump.
This is not a war between the left and the right. This is a war between good and evil. So we can't combat that. We can't fight that in the natural. We need spiritual weapons to fight it. So prayer is one of them. And I believe President Trump is here because there's a purpose, there's a higher assignment for him to finish with this nation. So we're going to pray. Prayer, the Bible says that let's pray for the will of God to come.
Cult.
Meaning, what's the will of God? The Bible says God sets up kings.
If you're only listening, Trump has his head bowed and different people have their hands on Trump's shoulders and back.
He removes kings. We're going to pray for the will of God for him to be the next 47th president. Do you believe that? I want you to stretch your hands toward him. In the Old Testament, the prophets anointed the kings to become kings.
They're going to be anointing Trump now, except it's going to be with Diet Coke.
So today we're going to do what the Bible says. We're going to bring the will of God, and we're going to pray for the president, for President Trump to be the next president. So I want you to stretch your hand, and I want you to pray whatever you want to pray out loud, but let's pray with all the heart. Father, we thank you. We come to you. And
all right, so then they pray and it's completely bonkers. And then finally, right as the cult members are about to start speaking in tongues, YMCA hits and that marks the end of another event.
Is Lord over his life. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I hope you can feel the Latino love. Thank you, everybody.
Anyway, just completely whacked out. This is the choice. There are people who will be voting for more of that. I will not be one of them. I hope you won't either. We have a tremendous bonus show today. I can't even tell you what's on it because it is so jam-packed. I'll also be on the Piers Morgan program today. It might not air until tomorrow. Pre-order my book, The Echo Machine. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. And of course, sign up at joinpacman.com to directly support our work if you value it. I'll be back tomorrow, but I'll see you on the bonus show. Thanks a lot for watching today's show. I just want to take a second to tell you about today's sponsors. The only VPN to prove multiple times in court that they have no record of your internet activity is private internet access. Each time the judge said, show us the person's internet activity, and private internet access said, sorry, we don't have it. Their systems are also regularly audited by Deloitte to verify the no-log policy. And it's the only VPN with open source code, so the whole world can see that nothing is being logged. Private internet access is giving my audience 83% off, which is just $203 a month, plus 4 extra months for free. Go to piavpn.com/DavidP. The link is down below.